Christmas Eve. In a small diner on the outskirts of Vienna, Daniel Ross, a single dad, sat eating alone. The seat across from him was empty. He'd reserved a table for two, but his daughter was spending Christmas with her mother. He quietly poured water, watching snow fall outside. The door opened. A young woman entered with a small boy, their faces dirty and tired. They stopped in front of his table. She spoke softly, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry to bother you, but my son is hungry. Could you spare some bread?" Daniel froze, then smiled. "No need to share. Sit down, join me." Daniel Ross was 37 years old, a machinery repairman living alone in Vienna after his divorce 3 years ago. His ex-wife had left, taking their young daughter Lila with her to Germany. Every Christmas, Daniel kept the habit of ordering 2 meals. One for my daughter, one for the memory. He worked late hours, had few friends, but always smiled at strangers. Tonight, he'd stopped at Anna's Diner, a small place known for serving those who wandered the streets with nowhere else to go. As he sat eating in silence, a young woman entered with a pay around 6 years old. She looked exhausted. Her coat was torn. Her hand clutched an empty bread bag. The owner shook her head. "I'm sorry, we're out of charity portions for tonight." The woman thanked her and turned to leave, but the boy tugged her hand, looking at Daniel's table. She bowed her head, speaking quietly. "I'm sorry, my son hasn't eaten all day." Daniel stopped, set down his fork. "Owner, 3 more portions, please." All 3 sat at the same table. The boy smiled brightly, eating hungrily. The woman thanked him, tears rolling down her cheeks. "My name is Mara." Daniel replied, "Daniel, I wasn't planning to do anything this Christmas. Lucky you 2 showed up." The boy carefully wrapped leftover bread in a napkin. "I'll save this for someone who hasn't eaten yet." The words struck Daniel like lightning, exactly what his daughter used to say every year. He studied the boy more carefully. Same age as Lila would be now, same earnest eyes. "What's your name?" Daniel asked gently. "Leo," the boy said. "Do you live alone, sir?" Mara touched her son's arm. "Leo, that's not polite." "It's okay," Daniel interrupted. "Yes, I do. My daughter lives with her mother." "Then you're lonely too," Leo said with the brutal honesty only children possess. "Mama says lonely people should eat together." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "Your mama is very wise." As they ate, Daniel learned more. Mara had been an accountant before losing her job when her company went bankrupt. Her husband had left, abandoning them with debts. She and Leo had been homeless for nearly a year. "How do you stay so positive?" Daniel asked. Mara smiled weakly. "I have to. Leo only eats when I smile." Daniel looked at the boy, who was carefully dividing his food into portions. One to eat now, one to save. "He's a good kid," Daniel said. "He's everything," Mara replied. "Everything I have left." The diner owner brought coffee. "On the house. Merry Christmas." As they sat warming their hands on the cups, Daniel made a decision. "It's snowing heavily out there. Where are you staying tonight?" Mara hesitated. "We have a spot at a shelter." "Is it far?" "About 5 kilometers. Daniel stood. "Let me drive you. It's too cold for walking." Mara started to refuse, but Leo was already putting on his thin jacket, and Daniel saw her resolve crumble. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're very kind." In Daniel's old truck, Leo fell asleep almost immediately in the back seat, exhausted. Mara gave directions in a soft voice. As they drove through the snowy streets, she spoke more. About the job she'd lost, about the husband who'd left, about the months of sleeping in shelters and parks, about the constant fear that child services would take Leo away. "Why doesn't anyone help?" Daniel asked, genuinely confused. "They do," Mara said. "But there are so many of us. The system can't handle everyone. We slip through the cracks." When they arrived at the shelter, the manager informed them that their spot had been given away because they'd missed curfew. "But my son," Mara started. "Rules are rules," the manager said, already closing the door. Daniel saw Mara's face crumble, saw her struggle not to cry in front of Leo. He made another decision. "Come to my place. I have a spare room." "We couldn't. It's Christmas," Daniel said firmly. "No one should sleep in the cold on Christmas." Leo woke up at that moment. "Do you have cookies, sir?" Daniel laughed despite the heaviness in his chest. I think I can find some. Daniel's apartment was small but clean. One bedroom, a living room with a pull-out couch, a tiny kitchen that barely fit two people. Photos of Lila covered one wall. Birthday parties, school plays, summer vacations from before the divorce. A Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with homemade ornaments that Lila had made over the years. This is lovely, Mara said, looking around with genuine appreciation. Daniel felt embarrassed by the praise. It's not much, just an apartment. It's warm. It's safe. That's more than we've had in months, Mara said, her voice catching. You have no idea what that means to us. He showed them the bathroom, gave them clean towels, the good ones he usually saved for when Lila visited. He found some of his old clothes for Mara to sleep in, a soft t-shirt and sweatpants. While she showered, he made hot chocolate for Leo, who sat at the kitchen table, eyes wide with wonder, taking in every detail of the apartment. You have a whole house to yourself? Leo asked, his voice filled with awe. Just an apartment, Daniel corrected gently. But yes, just me most of the time. We used to have a house, Leo said, his voice dropping, before Papa left and the bank took it. It had a backyard with a swing. Daniel's heart broke at the matter-of-fact way the boy spoke about such loss. I'm sorry, buddy. It's okay. Mama says we're on an adventure. Leo's face brightened suddenly, the resilience of childhood shining through. She says adventures make you stronger and braver. Your mama's a very brave woman, Daniel said, meaning every word. The bravest, Leo agreed with fierce loyalty, then more quietly dropping his eyes to his hot chocolate. But sometimes at night when she thinks I'm sleeping, I hear her crying. She tries to be quiet, but I hear. Daniel had no response to that. What could you say to a 6-year-old who'd already seen too much of the world's cruelty? When Mara emerged from the shower, her hair clean and damp, wearing Daniel's old sweatshirt that hung almost to her knees, and sweatpants she had to roll up several times, she looked younger, vulnerable, more human than the desperate woman who'd approached his table at the diner. Thank you, she said again, seeming unable to stop expressing her gratitude. You've been so incredibly kind. It's just a place to sleep, Daniel said, uncomfortable with praise. It's more than that, Mara insisted. It's dignity. It's being treated like a person instead of a problem to be moved along or ignored. They sat in the living room, Daniel building up the fire while Mara settled on one end of the couch. Leo fell asleep almost immediately between them, clutching a cookie Daniel had found in the back of his cupboard. He'll sleep for hours now, Mara said softly, stroking her son's hair with infinite tenderness. First time in a warm, safe place in weeks. He's been so brave, but I know he's exhausted. You can both stay as long as you need, Daniel heard himself say, surprising himself with the offer. Mara shook her head firmly. That's too much to ask. We'll leave first thing in the morning. We've already imposed enough on your kindness. And go where? Daniel asked gently. She didn't answer, which was the answer enough. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire crackle and dance, Leo's gentle breathing between them. Can I ask you something personal? Mara said eventually, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course. Why are you really helping us? You don't know us. We could be criminals, con artists, anything. Most people would have walked past us at the diner. Why didn't you? Daniel thought about it for a long moment, trying to articulate feelings he barely understood himself. When my wife left 3 years ago, she took Lila to Germany to be closer to her family. I only see my daughter twice a year now. Christmas and summer, 4 weeks total out of 52. He paused, emotion thick in his throat. Every Christmas, I sit in that diner and order 2 meals. One for me, one for the daughter who isn't there. It's stupid, maybe, but it makes me feel less alone. Tonight, when you walked in with Leo, I saw what I'm missing every day. A child who needs a parent trying their absolute best against impossible odds. And I thought maybe I can't be with my daughter tonight, but I can help someone else's child. Maybe that's enough. Does that make sense? It makes perfect sense, Mara said, her eyes glistening with tears in the firelight. Thank you for seeing us as people, not just problems to be solved or charity cases to be pitied. The next morning, Daniel woke to the smell of coffee brewing and the sound of quiet movement in his kitchen. He found Mara there, having somehow figured out his ancient coffee maker, tidying up the kitchen with practiced efficiency. "I hope you don't mind," she said quickly. "I wanted to do something, anything to thank you. You've been so generous." "I don't mind at all," Daniel said honestly. "It's nice to wake up to coffee made by someone else." Leo was still asleep on the couch, peaceful in a way Daniel suspected was rare for the boy. His face was relaxed, one arm thrown over his head, the other clutching the blanket Daniel had covered him with. "He looks happy," Daniel observed, watching the gentle rise and fall of the boy's chest. "He is. For the first time in so long," Mara said, her voice breaking slightly. "Do you know what he asked me last night before he fell asleep? He asked if this was heaven. A warm couch and a full stomach. That's his idea of heaven now." Daniel felt tears prick his own eyes. "Mara, I need you to tell me. Tell me everything about why you're really in this situation." She set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "Daniel, I need to tell you something important. About why we're really here in Vienna. About why we've been running. But I'm afraid if I tell you, you'll make us leave." Before she could continue, there was a sharp knock at the door that made them both jump. Daniel opened it to find a well-dressed man in his 50s, wearing an expensive coat and flanked by two younger men in dark suits who looked more like bodyguards than assistants. "Daniel Ross?" the older man asked in a clipped, authoritative tone. "Yes? Can I help you?" "I'm Jonas Weber, CEO of V&L Financial Group. I'm looking for my ex-wife. I have very good reason to believe she's here with you." Daniel's blood ran cold. He looked back at Mara, who had gone completely pale, one hand pressed to her mouth. "I don't know what you're talking about," Daniel said carefully. Jonas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Her name is Mara Weber. She stole confidential financial documents from my company and fled with my son. She's a thief and a kidnapper. I'm here to take them home." "That's not true." "Oh!" Mara appeared in the doorway, Leo behind her, now awake and frightened. "You know that's not true, Jonas." "Darling," Jonas said in a voice that made Daniel's skin crawl with its false sweetness, "it's time to come home. You've had your little adventure. But this is embarrassing for both of us. Think of Leo." "I am thinking of Leo," Mara said, her voice stronger now. "That's why I'm not going anywhere with you." Jonas's smile disappeared, replaced by cold fury. "Then I'll call the police right now. Theft of corporate documents, kidnapping, violation of custody agreements. You'll lose him forever." "We never had custody agreements because you abandoned us." Mara shouted, her composure breaking. "You left us with nothing but debts." "I left you?" Jonas laughed harshly. "I offered you everything. A beautiful home, security, a comfortable life. All you had to do was keep quiet about some minor accounting irregularities. But you couldn't do even that simple thing." Daniel understood suddenly, the pieces clicking into place. "She found something illegal in your company." Jonas's cold eyes flickered to him. "Stay out of this, Mr. Ross. This is a private family matter that doesn't concern you." "No," Daniel said, stepping forward. "It's a matter of right and wrong, and I think you should leave my home." Jonas stepped closer, dropping his voice to a threatening whisper. "I have an army of lawyers. I have unlimited money. I have connections in every level of government and law enforcement. If you interfere with my family business, I will destroy you completely. Do you understand me?" "Get out of my home," Daniel said quietly. "Now." After Jonas left, threatening legal action and promising consequences, Mara collapsed into a chair, her whole body shaking. "He's right," she said through tears. "He has everything. Money, lawyers, connections. I have nothing, absolutely nothing." "You have the truth," Daniel said firmly. "The truth doesn't matter when the other side can buy any verdict they want," Mara said bitterly. "I learned that the hard way." Leo had started crying, overwhelmed by the confrontation. Mara held him tight, whispering reassurances that even she didn't believe. Daniel made a decision in that moment that would change all their lives. "Pack your things," he said. "Both of you. We're leaving. Right now." "Where would we even go?" "Somewhere safe. Somewhere Jonas can't find you while we figure this out properly." "Daniel, you can't throw your life away for us." I'm not throwing anything away, Daniel interrupted. I'm finally doing something that matters. Now pack. We need to move fast. They fled in Daniel's truck through the snowy streets of Vienna. Mara had grabbed a small bag, all their worldly possessions. Leo sat in the back, confused and scared. Where are we going? Mara asked. A friend's cabin, outside the city. Jonas won't find you there. Daniel, you don't have to do this. This isn't your fight. You asked me last night why I'm helping you. Here's the real answer. Because it's the right thing to do. And because I'm tired of watching good people suffer while bad people win. At a red light, Mara reached over and squeezed his hand. Thank you. The cabin belonged to Daniel's old friend, a mechanic who only used it in summer. Daniel had a key. It was rustic but warm, with a wood stove and enough supplies to last a few days. While Leo explored the cabin with childlike wonder, Mara finally told Daniel everything. She had been the chief accountant at V&L Financial. She'd discovered that Jonas was running a massive money laundering operation, funneling money through shell companies, defrauding investors of millions. When I confronted him, he was my husband. I thought he'd fix it, Mara said. Instead, he fired me, accused me of the fraud I'd discovered, and had me blacklisted from every firm in the country. Why didn't you go to the police? I did. They said I needed proof. But Jonas had already destroyed most of the evidence and framed me as a disgruntled employee making false accusations. She pulled a flash drive from her pocket. This is all I have left. Copies I made before he found out. But it's not enough on its own. Daniel looked at the small device. What's on it? Transaction records, email chains. Enough to prove Jonas knew about the fraud. But without corroboration, any lawyer will argue I fabricated it. Then we need to find corroboration. How? Jonas has everyone at V&L under his control. Daniel thought for a moment. Not everyone. There must be other people who know. Other accountants, managers. Someone who's been waiting for someone brave enough to speak first. Over the next 2 days, Daniel reached out to his network. He called old friends, former colleagues, anyone who might have connections to V&L Financial. One name kept coming up, Marcus Klein, a junior analyst who'd left the company 6 months ago under mysterious circumstances. Daniel found Marcus working at a coffee shop, having been blacklisted like Mara. When Daniel mentioned Jonas Weber, Marcus's face darkened. He destroyed my career, Marcus said. I found discrepancies in the accounts, reported them, got fired for performance issues. Would you testify? Daniel asked. Testify to what? I have no proof. It's my word against a billionaire's. Not if there are two of you. Mara Weber, Jonas's ex-wife, has documents. If you corroborate her testimony. Marcus's eyes widened. Mara survived. I heard Jonas had her arrested. He tried. She ran. She's been homeless for a year. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Tell me what you need. Back at the cabin, Daniel found Mara teaching Leo to make hot chocolate. Both of them laughing. The scene stopped him in his tracks. This was what a family looked like. Not perfect, but real. Warm. Full of love despite hardship. Marcus Klein will testify, Daniel announced, and I found 2 others who've been waiting for someone to stand up to Jonas. If you come forward, they'll support you. Mara's hands shook. And if we lose? Then at least we tried. At least we fought. That night, Daniel compiled everything. Mara's documents, statements from Marcus and the others, a timeline of events. He sent it all to a journalist friend who specialized in financial crimes. The article hit the next morning. V&L Financial CEO accused of massive fraud by multiple former employees. Jonas called Daniel's phone within an hour. You have no idea what you've done, Jonas hissed. I will ruin you. I will ruin her. I will. You're done, Daniel said calmly. The police are already investigating. 3 people are willing to testify. It's over. He hung up. Mara was crying but smiling. We did it. We actually did it. Leo ran in. Mama, why are you crying? Happy tears, baby. These are happy tears. But their relief was short-lived. That evening, Jonas arrived at the cabin. He'd somehow found them. He wasn't alone. 2 large men flanked him. I want those documents, Jonas said. All of them, every copy. The police already have them, Daniel said. Then you'll recant. Say you fabricated everything. No. Jonas nodded to his men. They moved forward. Daniel stepped in front of Mara and Leo. Touch them and you're done. I've recorded everything. Every threat, every illegal action. Jonas's face contorted with rage. You think you're a hero? You're nothing. A divorced mechanic playing savior. Maybe, Daniel said, but I'm the nothing who just took down a billionaire. The sound of sirens cut through the night. Daniel had called the police before Jonas arrived. As officers handcuffed Jonas, the man screamed threats and curses. One officer approached Mara. Ms. Weber, we need your statement. She looked at Daniel, who nodded encouragement. I'm ready, she said. 1 week later, Mara and Leo returned to Vienna. Jonas had been arrested on multiple charges. The case was national news. Other victims were coming forward. V&L Financial was under investigation. The company would likely collapse, but thousands of defrauded investors would get their money back. Mara and Leo stayed with Daniel while they figured out their next steps. You don't have to do this, Mara said one evening. We can find our own place now. I know, Daniel replied, but I'd like you to stay, if you want to. Why? Daniel looked at Leo, who was drawing at the kitchen table. Because this apartment has been quiet for too long. Because Leo makes me remember what it's like to have a kid around. Because... He hesitated. Because you both feel like family. Mara's eyes filled with tears. We'd like to stay. Christmas came again. This time Daniel wasn't alone. He set the table for 3. Mara cooked. Leo helped, making a mess and laughing. When they sat down to eat, Leo raised his glass of juice. A toast to Daniel for saving us. I didn't save you, Daniel said. You saved yourselves. I just helped a little. You helped a lot, Mara said softly. After dinner, Leo asked, can we do this every year? Eat together on Christmas? Daniel looked at Mara. She smiled and nodded. Yes, Daniel said. Every year. That night, after Leo was asleep, Daniel and Mara sat by the fire. I got a job offer, Mara said, at a nonprofit that helps fraud victims. They want someone who understands the system. That's perfect, Daniel said. And there's an apartment nearby. Small, but we could afford it with my salary. Daniel felt a pang of disappointment. That's great. Mara looked at him. Or we could stay here, if you want. I want, Daniel said quickly. Then more carefully, I mean, if that's what you want too. It is, Mara said. Leo loves it here. He loves you, and I... She paused. I think I could too. Love you, I mean, if you'll let me. Daniel reached for her hand. I think I already do. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, watching the fire. Outside, snow fell softly on Vienna. Inside, 3 people who'd been lost had found their way home. 1 year later, Christmas Eve returned to Vienna. Anna's Diner had a new sign, free meals for families in need, sponsored by Ross and Weber Foundation. Daniel and Mara had used part of the whistleblower reward money to establish a foundation helping single parents and homeless families. On Christmas Eve, they served meals themselves. Leo, now 7, helped cut bread and distribute it to families in need. Daniel watched the boy carefully portion each loaf, making sure everyone got an equal share. He's so much like you, Mara said, appearing beside him. He's better than me, Daniel replied. He's been through hell and still sees the good in people. Mara squeezed his hand. He learned that from you. At the end of the night, after everyone had been fed, the 3 of them sat at their favorite table. Remember last year, Leo asked, when we first met here? I remember, Daniel said. I was sitting alone. And I was hungry, Leo added. And I was scared, Mara said. And now, Daniel asked. Leo smiled. Now we're a family. Mara raised her glass. To second chances. Daniel raised his. To courage. Leo raised his juice box. To always sharing bread. They clicked their glasses together, laughing. The diner owner brought out a cake she'd made specially. For the family that saved this place. We didn't save it, Mara protested. You did, the owner insisted, by showing us that kindness matters more than money. As they ate cake and drank hot chocolate, Daniel looked around at the faces in the diner, other families they'd helped, people who'd been lost and found their way back. The diner's wall now held a small plaque. No one should eat alone on Christmas Eve. Underneath in smaller letters, one meal can satisfy hunger for a day. One act of kindness can save a life. Daniel pulled Mara close, Leo between them. Next year, he said, we'll need a bigger table. Why? Mara asked. Because Lila's coming, Daniel said. My ex agreed to share Christmas, so we'll need a fourth chair. Then we'll get one, Mara said, kissing his cheek. Outside, snow fell softly on Vienna, covering the world in white. Inside, warmth and laughter filled the air. And no one ate alone. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to Strong Dad Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten.